This is the Cash Car Convert Podcast, Episode 3.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, where cash cars are cool and auto debt's dangerous to your future. I'm your host, James Kinson, and in this episode, I'll be interviewing Mr. Ron Montoya, Consumer Advice Editor at Edmundscom. Edmunds.com is a great resource on the web that I like to use in a lot of my research. They have a lot of capabilities around researching both new and used cars, and Ron has been with them for a while now. He's been an author of many articles, and a lot of them having to do with buying and maintaining inexpensive cars. And I'll link to a number of those articles in the show notes. A few of those are buying a used car for under $2,500, how to buy and maintain a very inexpensive car, how to find a good car mechanic, and then a project we'll dive into a little deeper later on is the Debt-Free Car Project. And with that, Ron, welcome to the show.
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. Ron, before we jump into Edmunds, this is something I like to ask all of my guests, and that is what their first car was, how they came to have it, and what their experience was with it.
Sure. Well, my first car was an 84 Toyota Corolla. My dad had got it for me when I was 17 years old, and I didn't have it very long because he didn't really get it researched properly in terms of, what problems it had, because it started overheating on me within a couple of months. And I tried to get it fixed as best I could, but ultimately it sort of overheated to the point where the engine blew. And I ended up, purchasing a car with my own money. And so that was a 92 Honda Prelude that I purchased as a salvage title. Okay. And
did that one work out better for you?
It did. It ended up working out really well because I kept that car for about 12 years, and I put probably about 150,000 miles on it.
Wow, that's a really good accomplishment. I probably haven't owned a car that long other than one. I had an Isuzu Trooper that I owned for about 12 years, so pretty close. So Ron, tell me a little bit about yourself and how you came to be at Edmunds and how long you've been there.
Sure. Well, I've been at Edmunds for 5 years, and I studied journalism in school, and I've always been into cars, so that's something that was sort of a natural fit. And I came here, started out as an intern, and I had some dealership experience because I had worked at a Honda dealership for about 4 years, and I kind of moved around on the service and parts side of things. So, I started out as a cashier. I worked in the parts department. I even went into the accounting department. So I had some knowledge of how the dealerships worked, and, with my writing ability, it was just a nice fit for Edmunds, and, I've been there ever since.
Now, that sounds like a really good fit, and what I'd really like for my listeners to get a good feel for today is what kind of capabilities Edmunds.com can give to them. I know it's a resource that I use and think there's a lot of value in, and so could you just kind of go through some of the capabilities that exist on Edmunds and how somebody might use those to find an inexpensive car?
Sure. Well, Edmunds is kind of a one-stop shop for everything you need to know when it comes to buying a car or researching a car. So one of the things you could do is start out by researching a car. We have reviews, and if you go to a specific model review, you can find out anything from the changes on any given year into what you need to look out for in certain years. Like, for example, if they added a new engine, we'll give some commentary as far as whether that engine was better, if it made the car worse. You can also price out your car. So if you want to know what you're going to pay for a car, or even if you want to know what your own car is worth, you can do that as well. We have all these pricing tools that are available that, can give you a really complete picture of what your car is worth. And also you can locate cars. So for used cars, we have this, which is any dealerships that are around, you can locate a car and, kind of save yourself the time of going to multiple websites to search for a car.
Okay, is that by zip code?
It is. It's filtered by zip code, and we don't have every dealership out there, but the list is constantly growing. So we're really trying to get as many cars as we can available there.
Okay, very nice. And in terms of somebody researching an inexpensive car, how far back can they go on that research? How far back does your research go?
Our data goes to the 1991 model year, so obviously the further back you go, we don't have as detailed records.
Sure.
but that's as far as you can go, which is a pretty good range. And typically, if you're going to be looking for an inexpensive car, you want to find something that's around 10 years old or a little bit older than that if you can, to save yourself a little bit of money. So we definitely have you covered from all those years.
That's great. No, that's good, and I agree. I think that's a really good range, unless somebody's looking for some type of maybe exotic older car or something. But yeah, that should certainly meet most people's needs. I know there's a lot of different information out there, but can you talk about what kind of advice articles there are out there? Are there? I know there's a number. Can you kind of give me a feel for what kind of articles exist out there that are over and above the research that we may have already talked about?
Sure. Well, we have a number of different categories. We have articles on safety. We have articles on maintenance. We have articles on buying, on leasing, on even financing as well. So, and it runs the range. So we have an article ranging from if you have poor credit to an article talking about, how long do you have to take out a car loan for if you want to do that? And, just there's so many different topics that we cover. So that's located in our tips and advice section. And I've written a few of those, and my colleagues have as well. So, we really have all the bases covered when it comes to finding out advice for what you want to do with your car.
I'd kind of like to now jump into the debt-free car project. I know you led that project at Edmunds, and I've read I believe it's 8 chapters in the articles, and I found them very fascinating. I thought there was a lot of really good information for people who are looking at buying a cash car. And with that, why don't you tell us a bit about that project, some of the major lessons learned and points about that?
Sure. This project came about when we started to read reports on these buy here, pay here dealers. And for those who aren't familiar with it, these are dealers in which they cater to selling cars to people with poor credit who end up having to finance at very high interest rates. And you're typically getting an older car, the condition level is not that great. And oftentimes you're asked to pay your monthly payment at the dealership, which is why they call it buy here, pay here. And so the cars are really expensive because of the interest rates as high as like 17% in some cases. And it's just, we wanted to offer people an alternative to that. So we thought, what if you could just save up a couple of $1,000, a reasonable amount. We chose around $3,500 plus tax. It ended up pushing to about $3,800 for us. And we figured, what was it like? What kind of car could you get in this condition? What kind of issues would you run into over the course of 1 year? So that was sort of the nature of this project. And what we ended up finding was a 96 Lexus ES300. We kind of wanted a bit of a stylish car because, when you own a car, you want to feel a little bit proud of the car you're driving. I mean, I know it's a mode of transportation, but, a lot of people feel happy about the car they want. So we kind of went with, it's an older car, but it was a Lexus at one point in time. So it was a luxury car, and it was a little bit nicer than perhaps a Camry, which would be its equivalent. So, we drove this car for a year and, encountered a lot of ups and downs with it. But I think for the most part, we were very happy with what we got because it only left us stranded 2 times in an entire year. We drove the car 15,000 miles, which is a lot more than what people would drive in an average year. So it was a really good project for us.
And again, I've reviewed that article myself, so I know, you did some maintenance items like tires and that sort of thing. But what were some of the major repairs that you had during that project?
Sure. Well, we knew that no car in this price range was going to be perfect. And I think that's what people need to consider when they're looking into a cash car is that you have to get yourself a maintenance budget. And what we did was we said, okay, so since we're not paying monthly payments anymore, what if we did a monthly payment to ourselves that would cover our maintenance costs? So we chose around $365, which the way we came up with that number was that was about the average price of what someone would be paying on a monthly payment loan for someone with, more or less poor credit. So we just kind of used that number and we sort of gave ourselves that monthly budget every month. And in the first year, we did come across a couple of high-ticket items. Like, for example, the car needed new tires and a battery, and that was about $519.
Yep.
One of the early issues that we ran into was that it needed some control arms and bushings for the front, and that was also a kind of a high-ticket item, which was $567. So when we started out this project, we kind of went over budget in the beginning. We wanted to get the car sorted out, at the same time make it safe. Mentioned so that people don't get scared off by this is that, the average person, you can tackle those issues, in terms of what you need the most. So, maybe you get new tires first, and then you kind of wait about a month or two until you could save up the money for the rest of the items.
Sure.
Some of the other issues that we run into was the mass airflow sensor went out on us. That was $240, and an oxygen sensor. Now, I'm rattling off all types of repairs here, and I don't want to give the impression that this happened all at once. This was over the course of our one-year project.
Right.
So, eventually these costs were able to spread themselves out. And so the first 3 months of our budget, when we look back at what our numbers look like, were in the red, so to speak.
Right.
But after that, things, were sorted out with the car, and we did not go over the budget for the remainder of the year. So that's, I think, what's positive about it. And looking forward even more, in that second year, you're going to pay even less because you're not buying a new battery and tires every year or even control arm bushings.
Right.
So, this is something that it can be a little intimidating at first, but if you sort of stick with it in the long run, it's going to pay off for you.
Right. I think that's exactly right. When you look into something like this, you have to look at how it's been maintained previously, right? And if you're buying a car that needs tires, then you kind of know that going in. And I believe in the article, you guys even stated that some of those repairs, somebody who was buying this for their own use could have put off, like the tires may have lasted a little bit longer, and you kind of needed to do the control arm because you had purchased the new tires, therefore you needed to make sure that you didn't wear those tires out more quickly than you might have otherwise. And so I know there were some things you guys did, especially because you were going to be doing a cross-country trip in this car as well. So there were some things that you did where somebody who was just commuting, 5 or 10 miles to work might not have done as readily. But even with all of that, when the numbers were all said and done at the end of the year, if you compared that to one of these buy here, pay here kinds of lots, I believe you still came out quite a bit ahead on that, if I'm correct.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a writer from one of the publications for the buy here, pay here dealerships. He had become a big critic of our project, and he kind of said, look, you can get a car that's a 10-year-old car, and he named a Ford Taurus, for only $800 down, and you don't have to save up, and it's going to be a more reliable car. And he started to kind of give out a couple of numbers. Like, for example, he said that this car would cost about $5,000 at an auction. But once you start to factor in the typical markup that's placed at a dealership and the fact that someone would have had to finance this car, by our calculations, at the end of a 3-year loan with the interest rate and all that, this car would have cost you $12,700.
Wow.
And paying $355 a month, and that doesn't even include your maintenance costs. And when we sort of did the math on it, in that 1 year, we would have saved $5,600 over buying it at a buy here, pay here dealership when we went with our cash car, right? And our maintenance was included. So it's just a much better deal to get a cash car, and you're going to save money in the long run, but you have to sort of be aware that there are going to be a couple of repairs that you have to do to make sure you get the car on the right track. But once you've taken care of it, once you've maintained it properly, it's going to be a better value for you in the long run.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because once you can get a car that you've purchased in good condition and you've taken care of the little niggling things that may have existed that somebody else didn't take care of, then I think it's really important, and I think you guys mentioned it a couple of times in the article too, that you were able to locate a good mechanic to work with, and I certainly know that's been a blessing to me, having a good mechanic that I could count on to give me good advice about what needed to be done now versus what could wait, and somebody that I could trust. So I'd certainly highly recommend that somebody make sure that they located a good mechanic. And I'd probably point them to your article about how to find a good car mechanic to help them get sorted on that as well.
Yeah, definitely. And I think just if you just have a word of mouth, so in other words, ask your friends who they take their cars to. They may be able to point you in the right direction. Or another good one that we recommend is using Yelp.com. This is a site that's typically used for restaurant reviews, but a lot of people are starting to use it for mechanics and other repair shops. And we found a couple of mechanics on Yelp and had a good experience with it. And like you said, the importance is once you find that mechanic, you keep going with him, because we gave our one mechanic repeat business, and for this smaller repair, he ended up doing it for free because he knew that we had been there a little bit earlier on, so he wanted to maintain our business. So it's really important to have a mechanic that you trust.
That's fantastic. Yeah, that's really good news. And again, I know this car made a long distance trip across the U.S. I believe it was coast to coast, and I know there was one issue there that happened along the way, but what other either issues or lessons learned about this vehicle do you have to offer for our Cash Car listeners?
Well, I think some of the lessons that I learned is that if you want to really keep your costs down, it's kind of important to have some knowledge of basic repairs, or even how to find answers for those repairs that you need. So a lot of the times we ended up Googling the problem we had with the car, and we were able to find message boards. Seems like every car nowadays has a message board dedicated to it, and people are always posting any issues that they have and any potential fixes for them. So that was one resource for us that we used. And we also recommend sometimes going on YouTube. You can find people, installing a part or troubleshooting an issue with you, and it was just a really good way of sort of, even if we're not able to fix it ourselves, at least of knowing what's wrong with the car, so that we can point the mechanic in the right direction, or at least know what kind of repairs we're getting into and whether we need to save up for it or not. So I think that's what's important, and just being able to sort of check your oil, keep the tire pressure up on the tires. And it's important to just kind of have those basic skills to just really keep the car as best shape as possible.
I agree with that 100%. And I too have benefited from message boards. I had a really quirky thing going on with a Jeep Grand Cherokee Limited that I had. When you had the lights on and you depressed the brakes, one light would on the back would go out instead of coming on brighter. And sure enough, I found a fix for that on a message board, and it was just you had to go out there and bend a little piece that had overheated in the brake light assembly, and it was a really simple fix. But I was very concerned I was going to get pulled over for not having a working light. So it was one that saved me a lot. And same thing with YouTube. I've definitely used that to help me understand how a particular repair needed to be done, or like you say, you can see how to check your oil and those kinds of things. There's lots of good information out there about that. So I agree. Those are really wonderful bits of information, and the web is a great resource for that sort of thing. Whether this is from your experience on the Debt-Free Car Project or just other work that you've done, is there any specific advice you would give beyond that you've already given around, for my Cash Car Convert listeners? Anything in particular you'd have to say to them to advise them about how to go about, finding a good car, and anything they should be aware of?
Yeah, one of the things that I would recommend is that when you're in your buying phase, that you get a vehicle history report for any car that you're interested in. And I know that AutoCheck lets you pay, I think it's around $55, and you can get an unlimited amount of reports. And that might be the way to go, because then you can run a report for any car you're interested in. And what you do is you type in a vehicle identification number into there, and it'll give you a report, and it'll let you know whether the car has been in an accident, how many miles it has, and just sort of verify that. Sometimes it will flag you if the miles don't match up. That might turn you on to any tinkering with the odometer. And just kind of, it can sometimes eliminate a car without you having to sort of go down there, take a look at the car yourself, right? If you see, okay, this car's been in an accident, I may want to steer clear of this one, it can really help save you the time and of getting that car inspected. So that's a way to sort of narrow down the search, and is use those tools available to you.
I think those types of tools are very helpful, and does help prevent people from buying cars. I think especially with the rollback odometers flood cars and cars that may have other issues, accidents and so forth. You can see those called out pretty readily and saves a lot, or salvage titles, for instance, right? So it saves you a lot of grief there. So we've talked about, I talked about some of the articles that you yourself had written. So similar kind of question, is there a set of articles, or are there a set of articles that you would point people to that are interested in cash cars that are specific to Edmunds.com? Is there, other than, again, those that I've already called out, are there some out there you can think of?
Sure. There's also one that I wrote, and this is sort of to help you decide whether you need to get into a new car. And by new, I just mean a different one.
Sure.
There's one called Should I Fix It Up or Trade It Up? And it kind of talks about some of the questions that you need to ask yourself, like, how much are you spending on maintenance on your car? How many times is it breaking down on you? What are the benefits of buying a newer car? And it's just kind of, a lot of times people ask this question, they say to themselves, I got this high ticket repair, but should I fix this or should I just get a new car? And just the quick answer is that in most cases, it's better to fix the current car that you have, because even if you have a $2,000 repair bill, that's not going to be enough to buy you a car. And
right.
if this $2,000 is going to get you back on track, then it's going to be better for you in the long run to just stay in your car, because you have to also factor in the price of getting a new car. So that's one that I would recommend off the top of my head. And also, just if you're sort of new to selling, we have some articles about how to close the deal on a car sale, or a quick guide to selling cars. These are the titles of these ones that are in our buying and selling section. So I would definitely recommend those.
Good. Yeah, I think that's a really great thing, because I do think that people should at least look into selling their car themselves. They leave a lot on the table when they do trades, and I know there's a certain convenience factor there. But if you've maintained your car pretty well, you put a little elbow grease in it to clean it up, and depending on how busy the street is you live on and some of those kinds of things, you can sometimes sell them pretty quickly. But you certainly have to factor in your personal time into that and see what it's worth to you. And
yeah, definitely. And I would also caution people to sort of, be careful when you're selling cars, because there's a lot of crazy people out there. And when you sell your car, make sure you're safe about it. In other words, meet at a gas station. When I'm selling a car, I don't have people meet me at my house. I just meet them at the gas station, about a mile away. Use public places. When you're getting someone to call you, you can tell if they're asking you questions about the car, like, hey, can you tell me about this car? Those are the normal responses. But once in a while, you'll get someone like that's just going to just cut straight to a price, or, ask for your address or something like that. So just be careful with that stuff, and just how a person is screening you to sort of see what kind of an owner you are. You want to screen them to see what kind of a buyer they are.
That's a really good point, and the world is getting a little crazy these days, and we do have to think about those things a lot more than maybe we did in the past, that's for sure. Ron, I want to be respectful of your time here, and I really appreciate all the good information you've given the listeners here. How can people best contact you that might be interested?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I'm at Ron Montoya Edmunds. That's Edmunds. Or you can find me on the About the Editors page on Edmundscom.
Perfect. Thank you again for your time. Folks, if you enjoyed this episode, please go to iTunes and leave a rating and review. This will help this podcast get more recognition and notice in iTunes. And I would also ask that you check out my blog at cashcarconvert.com. And again, I want to thank Ron for his time here today, and I want to thank all of you for listening. Thank you. Hey everybody, James Kinson here, the Cash Car Convert. Welcome back. Glad you stuck around. I want to thank Ron Montoya for being on the show. I thought he did an excellent job of representing Edmunds and how you as a buyer can use their tools. And really, whether you're a seller or a buyer, there's some really great resources out there for you to use that can make your car buying or selling experience much better. I want to briefly touch on a couple of those. One is obviously pricing. I mean, you can go out there and you can do research to help you get a feel for whether, what your car is worth. And again, that's whether you're buying or selling. What's the value of the vehicle? And so you can have a good ballpark. And again, prices are going to vary. If something's in really good condition, somebody may be asking more than that. If it's, not in such good condition, maybe they'll be asking less. But it gives you a ballpark. You're at least not going in blind, not really knowing what is a fair price. So that's some really good information. You can also do research and check out reliability of specific models, or as Ron said, even between model years, they change models often, and maybe the new model or the older model had a specific issue, and you can check that out and determine what cars you should be looking at to find a good, reliable used car. And lastly, there are the articles, and I'm specifically going to point you to the articles that Ron Montoya wrote, and I'll list those in the show notes, but there are a number of really good articles, and to me, I think, given the position that most of you are in, I think finding a good mechanic, the article about finding a good mechanic, is really a great one to look at. So I would highly encourage you to take a look at that. In closing here, I do want to just make a couple of comments about the Debt-Free Car Project. I think, first of all, Edmundscom did a great public service by getting this out and letting people know that there are alternatives to buying cars with debt. And in fact, this Debt-Free Car Project proved that driving a car with no debt on it is less expensive than buying a used car and making payments. And that's even if you go to the low end tote the note or buy here, pay here types of lots. So thank you for doing that, Edmunds. Having said that, I think the buying criteria for most of you out there and for me are a little different. Edmunds was working under a specific timeline. They were writing this for an article. And they had some parameters that might be a little different than what I might have. So to that end, I would recommend that you go out and look at my blog posts. I've written several articles, kind of a series about how to find and buy a good quality used car. And I would start with the 5 tips on how to buy a better used car. And I think that starting there will be a really good place to give you some compare and contrast to what they did with their Debt-Free Car Project, and why I think you can find a really good quality used car out there if you're patient and do your homework. So with that, I'm going to close this episode up. I'll do one last reminder that if you have comments for me, you can leave those on my website, either on the right-hand side there on the home page. You can leave me a voice message, or you can leave comments in the show notes. And I certainly encourage you to go out to iTunes and leave me a rating and review. Let me know what you thought about about this episode and about the podcast in general. What can I do differently? What can I do better? What would you like to see more of? I want to be sure and get this message out. I think helping to eliminate auto debt is something that can change people's lives and help them have a better future for themselves and their families. So thank you for listening. This is James Kinson. I am the Cash Car Convert, encouraging you to buy a cash car and kick auto debt to the curb. Thank you.